Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Coaching Call podcast. On this podcast, we'll cover various types of coaching by trainers in sports, martial arts, fitness, and business. We'll discuss each coach's methods to getting the most out of their respective athletes or clients and how they attempt to change the platform in which they coach. Join us on a fun adventure as we discuss unique coaching styles. Coaching is a universal part of how we get others to get something done. Join your host, Raphael, and his guests on this unique journey in coaching.
Hi, I'm Sifu Raphael, and this is the Coaching Call podcast. If you enjoy this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. This episode was made possible by listeners like you. Cheryl, thank you so much for being on the coaching call with me this morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, Sifu, and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. Not only that, but we're going to get down to all those amazing swords and weapons behind you. But we'll get to that in a little later. Cheryl, I love getting to know people from when they were young, right? Because a lot of the things that have happened to us in our lives, I think a lot of the foundation, if you will, stems from our childhood. So I'd love to know, before you were at the age of 10, where'd you grow up, first of all, and who would you say were your biggest influencers then?
Well, okay, I grew up in a small steel town outside of Pittsburgh called Aliquippa, and that's why I now live in Denver. I grew up in a house full of girls. I have four sisters, and the three of us older girls, my two older sisters and myself, my mom had the three of us in 4 years. So I would have to say, growing up, my biggest influencers were my two older sisters, as well as two female cousins that were about the same age as well.
Wow. So when you say they were your influencers, what do you mean by that? How did they influence you?
We did everything together pretty much because we were so close in age. I, of course, being the third one, was the youngest, and I was not nearly as, let's just say, robust as my two older sisters. You know, they were nice and strong and healthy, and I was a little bit puny and tiny. So I tried to keep up with them and do everything that they did. And of course, they kept an eye on me, thank God, because it didn't always go very well.
Gotcha. So no male dominance in you, because you had two female cousins, your three sisters, and your mom. Obviously, your dad was outnumbered, right?
Yes, he was.
So I just met somebody who has 6 girls. So imagine the dad in that episode. When we consider our lives, it's I think it's the people that influence us. Going along outside of your family, who would you say were your biggest influences early on in your life?
Boy, that would be a tough one. There were some family friends that we were close to. We grew up, this sounds silly, but we grew up in a swimming pool. My parents were very instrumental in getting this swimming pool built in our community. It was a community pool. And it just happened to be right in our backyard. Right off of our property was where the pool property started. So that's where a lot of our longtime friendships began. Learned how to swim, of course, was on the swim team until I was 17. I didn't really like it, but that's what we did. So that was a lot of the influencing from, the coaches and the older kids who would help coach us as we were climbing up the ranks on swim team.
I love what you said, how the other kids were helping and guiding, because I think that's such a beautiful thing when we can teach a child to teach someone else what they know, because it gives them power, right? Power in a positive way, I'm saying. Some
Right.
kids take it the wrong way, right?
Mhm.
So, wow. Your parents, of course, I would want to build the pool right next door to my jump over the fence and you're there, right?
Didn't even have to jump the fence because we lived on top of a hill. It's a
Mm,
beautiful house. My father actually built the house himself.
um,
He was a bricklayer and a welder and a couple of other things, but it was a steep hill. All we had to do was just kind of roll down the hill in the morning, and boom, there we were at the swimming pool. We would start, I think it was as early as 8 a.m. doing swim lessons, and then we'd roll right into swim team.
mm.
And let me tell you, it was not a heated pool. So 8 o'clock in the morning, early spring, Western Pennsylvania, you learn how to be pretty tough.
You have no choice.
Yes.
When I was in high school, I used to go in zero period and teach kids who didn't know how to swim.
Aw.
So zero period for us was probably 7 a.m. And
Well,
go ahead.
well, I grew up in a high school. We didn't have anything like a swimming pool. We were lucky to have a basketball court indoors. But at the pool, we would get the younger kids after swim team, we'd run up, go have lunch, come back and spend the rest of the day at the pool. And there were an awful lot of little kids there.
Mm,
So we would play with the kids. And through that play, we were teaching them how to swim, but in a fun,
mm.
non pressuring way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the kids that I taught were the one they came on their own because they wanted to learn how to.
Mm,
So it was not a class. It was open to whoever wanted to learn how
hmm
to swim. They would
hmm
come to. So when you consider those days of swimming, and you said you didn't like being on the swim team,
No.
but it probably taught you something, right? What would you say was that lesson that you would say that's still kind of with you today?
Hmm. I would say number one would be teamwork,
Mm,
team effort, which,
mm,
I was learning that at home anyway with all my sisters
yeah,
and my cousins. And also perseverance, never give up.
mm. That's what
Sometimes we would win, a lot of times we didn't, but we just kept trying.
yeah, yeah. That's one of the things that being part of a team at a young age kind of helps people understand that
Mhm,
I can't win alone, right? We need to do it together.
mhm.
So moving away from there, what was your take when you that was in high school, right?
That started actually in elementary school. I was started at 5
Oh
and
wow,
went up until 17.
nice, nice. Do you swim today?
I do not. I still love, getting in a pool, but chlorine and the hair is not compatible. Starts turning funny colors, green and blue, and it doesn't look really that good on me. So I really don't swim. And I don't have access to a pool like I did back then. As the years went by after I moved to Colorado, I, would live in an apartment. They would have a pool, but anytime I would go on vacation, my husband always knew where to find me. I was at the pool.
That's awesome. So considering you talked about some of the people who helped guide you when you were a teenager and so forth. What would you say if you were to look back in your 20s, if you say there's one person that really affected me in a positive way or negative? Because sometimes I think that our biggest coaches are the ones that maybe hurt us the most. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's the ones that do the right thing. So which one was it for you?
Boy, that's a tough one. I would have to say that it would probably be like the people that I worked with. I was a respiratory therapist,
Mm,
and at a very young age, I was put in a managerial supervisory position. I was the day shift supervisor. So there I was, 22, and I was supervising people who were 20 years older than me.
mm,
I had a lot more education. They had more experience. And in some cases, it was a match made in heaven. And in other cases, some of the Some of my colleagues were a little bit resentful because they felt that I didn't have to go through hoops the way they did. But I got a 4-year degree in cardiopulmonary medicine, and a lot of them were either on the job training or, a 1-year course.
Mm, got it. What made you go into that, by the way?
Oh, geez. Well, I didn't pick respiratory therapy. It was picked for me.
What? Tell me.
Oh, it's a good story. So when we were the three of us, before my mom had my two younger sisters, my dad was from Eastern Europe. He was quite the manly man. And my mother never went to college. She graduated high school. And she thought the most wonderful thing would be for us girls to get a college degree, go to college. And my father said, well, they're girls. They don't need to go to college. They're going to get married and, have kids. And so that's kind of the way it was. And my mother was crushed. It's like, oh my God, I want my girls to go to college. So one day out of the blue, my dad comes home from work, the steel mill, and he looked at my mother and he said, babe, I think they should go to college. And my mother was like, singing the Hallelujah chorus. And she said, George, what changed your mind? And I'm going to clean this up for you.
Sure.
But he said, well, just in case one of them ends up with a real jerk, they have something to fall back on. And so that was his motivation. My mom didn't care whatever it was that, going to send him to college. So my mother, and I was born, in the 50s. So this is the mindset then. She thought, well, okay, the only professions that she knew of for girls would be either nursing or teaching. So, and ironically enough, my oldest sister is a teacher. My second oldest sister went into med tech, but only lasted a year in the field. And I did everything that sister did. I followed in her footsteps. So when she started college and she came home one time for vacation, and she looked at my mother and said, Mom, Cheryl cannot do this. She's not smart enough. She cannot become a med.
Oh, we lost you, Cheryl. We lost you for a second. So just Cheryl is having her neighbors are getting work done, so hopefully they didn't cut out her cable.
They better not.
You're back. Okay. You said your sister said you're not cut out for it.
Yep, that I didn't have the smarts to be able to do the work. The curriculum was too hard. And she said, but there's this new field called inhalation therapy. That's what they called it back then. And it's not nearly as hard. So she might be able to do that. So they basically picked that for me. That was going to be my career. I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even see my first patient until I was a junior in college. So I had to go to the school, the small state college, for 2 years doing prerequisites. And then they sent those of us who did make it through those 2 years, and there were only 20 of us, to this huge teaching hospital in Pittsburgh in the middle of the city. It was absolutely terrifying when I realized, oh my God, I'm going to be responsible for life support equipment. No. I want to do nice things. I want to sell Estee Lauder. I want to do things that are pretty. So that's basically how I ended up in the field and launched my first career. It took a lot of getting used to, since there were only 20 of us and we were all going through the same thing together. We pretty much clung to each other to support each other because we were seeing things that I never thought I would ever see in my life.
Yeah. Well, when you're put in a situation where you didn't necessarily pick it, but you went with the flow.
I really kind of didn't have a choice, because the only thing I could have done was, go to my mom and dad and say, hey, I don't want to do this, where they have already invested 2 years in my education. The only other the only other path I could have chosen where those prereqs would have been applicable was nursing. And to me, that's even worse. So I thought, I'm just going to suck it up. I'm going to deal with it. And I did it for over 17 years, almost 20 years, and really did like it once I got used to it. It was a very exciting career. It was very challenging. Sometimes it was very heartbreaking, but to be the person at the bedside, since it's respiratory therapy, if a person was in a crisis emergency situation, we were the ones that would manage the airway. So I was the one always at the head of the bed, talking to them, trying to calm them down. And that was very rewarding.
Right. Yeah. I can only imagine. So how did you get to be the head when you were 22? How did
The head
that
of
come up?
what?
You were in charge of all these people, right? How did that come about?
Yeah, that was weird too. I was working at another hospital, and I started moonlighting at the one up the street, just PRN. They pay really well. You show up when you want to, or when you can, when they need you. And it's not a lot of stress or responsibility there. You just come in, do the work, go home. And so I started doing some extra shifts at that hospital. And right away, you know, the management started perking up when they saw my work and when they saw how I was able to communicate with the patients. And then when they learned my background and my education, they just tapped me and said, "Hey, how would you like to be the day shift supervisor?" And I didn't know any better. So I said, "Sure." So they brought me on full time, and I was the supervisor.
Wow, good for you. So let's talk about how you have shifted. You said you were in it for what, 17, 20 years in it?
Hmm. Hmm.
What was it that made you shift?
I felt like I was losing my edge. I was losing the ability to have that clinical detachment, which you have to do when you're working in a situation like that. If you talk to first responders, they'll say the same thing. But I was at the point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I think I was just so either desensitized or maybe starting to be sensitized. And every single patient was like, somebody's mother, somebody's brother, somebody's child. And I had a couple of patients come in, boom, 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 that it was like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do it. And the ones that really just put me over the edge were the pediatrics. And
Oh,
I couldn't do it anymore. And I did work in a pediatric hospital for over a year. And even late in my career as a respiratory therapist, I took students from local school into, the children's hospital in Denver and helped them with their clinical work.
that has to be tough. That definitely has to be tough.
It really is. It's hard work.
Yeah.
Emotionally, very hard work.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, you go home with that, the thought of
You
the,
do. You
yeah.
do.
So what was the shift? Where did you say, okay, I can't do this anymore. What am I going to do next? What was that conversation like in your own head?
I wanted to the girl who couldn't do the work for medical technology, couldn't do the curriculum, decided that she needed to get a master's degree.
Mm,
So I was looking for higher education, and I was looking in something that would still be medical, but a little bit different, getting away from the life or death type of situations. So I was looking at different, like speech pathology, speech language pathology, physical therapy, occupational therapy. And I just decided on PT because I thought it would be a perfect fit for me as a dancer, as somebody who had experienced a chronic pain syndrome in my own life.
mm.
With my background as a respiratory therapist, I already knew how to work with patients. So I thought it would be a really good fit for me. And I knew that it was very competitive. I knew it was very hard to get into the program. I was not willing to apply to schools all across the country, which is what a lot of people do. It's like they put in applications everywhere, hoping they'll get somebody to accept them. I just said, no, if it's not in my own backyard, I just don't want to do it. So I did apply to CU, Health Sciences Center is what they called it at the time. Now it's Anschutz, I think, Medical Center. I applied and I did not get in the first time I applied, which was really interesting. As a respiratory therapist with 17 years experience, I had great references. I had a 4.0 GPA on the prereqs that I had to take. And my, what was it? The GSAT was, wasn't the top of the list, but it's pretty good. But I didn't even get an interview.
Wow.
So I decided, you know what? I'm going to give it one more shot. I'll try again next year. If I don't get accepted, I was going to go into the field of neuroscience. And I did get accepted. So here we are.
Good for you. Good for you. So let's go ahead and talk about the weapons behind you. What possessed you? I mean, you have all these cool swords behind you. How did you get into that? Because you're just collecting them, you use them, or you teach them. What do you do?
I use them.
Nice.
I'm not very good at sword. It's a lot to handle, even just unsheathing, as you probably know, unsheathing and resheathing a 3-foot long blade is an art in itself and a skill. But yeah, I started training in an ancient Japanese martial art called Ninpo Tai Jutsu at the tender young age of 47. And I did not go willingly. That was the beginning of a whole new life.
What do you mean willingly? What, were you kidnapped?
Almost. So
Almost.
I met my sensei, Mark Hansen is his name. He's okay if I talk about him because I talk about him a lot.
I know Mark Hansen.
Oh, you know Mark? Yes. Oh, that's my sensei. So I went to him. I met him for the first time when I was 44. And it was I was looking for a new acupuncturist, and one of my clients said, hey, why don't you try this guy, Mark? I really like him. She was picky. If she liked him, he had to be good. So I made the appointment, went in, and he seemed like a nice enough fella. And when he started putting needles in my legs, he got a faraway look on his face. And he said to me, with your legs and my coaching, I could teach you how to kill with these things. All I could think of was, who in their right mind thinks like that, let alone says it out loud to a perfect stranger? And I thought, you know what? This guy's nuts. I think I'm just going to grab my purse and run. But he literally had me pinned to the table. So I was a captive audience. And that's how the whole thing began. And every single time I would go in for a session, he would talk about the art of the ninja and how much you would love it. You would be so good at it. You should train with me. And I kept looking at him saying, that's never going to happen. Never going to happen. So just drop it. Another long story. Finally, everything, the stars aligned, all that kind of stuff. And finally, it took him 3 years. 3 years. So it's a toss up. Which one of us is more stubborn?
Yeah.
Him for not giving up and him for just, badgering me. You've got to try it. You've got to try it. So finally I said, okay, after 3 years, I said, all right, I will take a few classes just to shut you up and to prove to you how much I'm going to hate it. And then I'll quit. And 10 years later, I became his first female black belt.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So it's important to take note on what you just said. It's persistence, one on him, not giving up on the potential that he saw in you. There's a lot of times, and it's also, I'm going to say follow-up. This is great for business, right? Because when somebody says no, that doesn't mean no. It means not now, right? So you said no first, and he goes, okay, I'll try again. I'll try again. I'll try again. And for him to continue for 3 years, that's persistence. That's true follow-up. There's a lot of people.
Well,
Don't
I
follow.
have to tell you,
Tell me.
there's more to the story.
Okay.
Right before I met Mark, I had had a very traumatic experience, and I didn't tell him about it. I had just stuffed it deep inside of myself because when I was trying to report, with the incident, get help for myself, blah, 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 all I got was that can't possibly happen. You're making it up.
Ah,
You're lying. It's the way people treat you, and I'm sure all of your listeners are kind of like nodding their heads. Yeah, I know, been there, done that. So I just stuffed it down deep inside until about a year and a half after I met him, it all came spewing out of me. And that's when his campaign to get me on the mat went into high gear
hmm.
because he kept saying, look, this can help you get your power back. This will help you heal. There's an incredible power of healing power in the martial arts, as you know. But I didn't know that because all I could think of was, I don't understand how hanging out in a smelly dojo with a bunch of sweaty men whose goal is it to attack me is going to make me feel any better. I just didn't see it. And then finally, I finally cracked after 3 years, it was like, okay, I'm at my wit's end. I had full blown PTSD. I had been suffering for 7 years. There was no place else for me to go or nothing else for me to do.
Hmm.
And I said, I will try it, although I know I'm going to hate it. But the funny thing is, Raphael, I did not hate it. I fell in love with the art. I fell in love with the training. And I really fell in love with the sense of empowerment that I got from my training. Even from the first day, I could feel something shift inside of me. I'm
Hmm.
not saying that this was a, smooth trajectory path to healing. It wasn't. It was a bumpy road. And it seemed like every time I would get to a certain level in my healing, I'd, drop back down again. So, but I never gave up. And I don't know why, but there was there was something about the art and about the training and the way I felt and even the way people would look at me, people who knew me for a very long time, the way they would look at me, the way they would talk to me, and even some of their comments, they're like, I don't know what you're doing, but I want some of that.
I want to know first day when you showed up to the dojo.
Oh,
What was that like? Tell me
oh,
about that day because that had to be an experience for sure.
oh yeah. Well, I was so nervous, so nervous, of course. I went to ballet class first, morning ballet class, and then, quick 20 minutes to the dojo. I was so nervous. I mean, I was like almost shaking. And I thought, it's okay. Mark's going to be there. He'll take care of you. Everything will be fine. Well, I walk in and the place is full of men, and they're stretching and punching and warming up and all this stuff. And I thought, oh my God, what is the protocol for greeting someone who's supposed to be beating you up in a couple of minutes? I didn't know. So I'm walking across the mat trying to be invisible, with my gi. And a lot of the guys stopped and, said hello and introduced themselves, which was very nice. They were very gracious. But Mark had assured me that he had plenty of women. There are going to be plenty of women in class. You're not going to be the only one, so don't worry about it. Well, not only was I the only woman in class, I was the only woman within like a 3-mile radius. And the worst thing is, I'm looking around and I didn't see Mark. So I'd go into the ladies' dressing room, and there actually was another young woman there. And I gave her a winning smile, introduced myself, and said, hey, can you help me with this gi? I don't know how it works. And she says, I can't even tie my own, and walked out. And it's like, well, I kind of doubt that because you're already wearing your gi. But okay, so I'm not going to get any female support here. So then I just figured out the gi, went out, and one of the guys came over to me and he introduced himself. He was a black belt. And he said, we usually stretch before class, so I can show you some stretches. Would you like me to show you some stretches? And I said, no, I'm good. I know how to stretch. And then I just slid down into this split and started doing forward bends and back bends. And the entire class just stopped and stared at me. And I thought, this isn't a way to fit in, is it? And they're looking at me And one of the guys said, "Where did you learn to do that?" And I says, "Well, I just came from ballet class." So it was terrifying. And
Mm.
Mark still hadn't shown up. So I asked the black belt, "Hey, where's Mark?" And he said, "Oh, you mean sensei." And so I giggled. To him, he was sensei. To me, he was just Mark. And he says, "Well, he's with a patient. He'll get here, when he's done. And in the meantime, we're just going to roll." And I'm like, "Roll? What are you talking about?" I had no idea that every class started with a series of rolls and break falls and even cartwheels and all this tumbling. I never would have shown up if I knew that. So he took me aside, started teaching me that. And then eventually Mark came in. And again, I'm at the end of the line, so uncomfortable. And they do the formal ray-in. I don't know what you do at your dojo or in your art form, but it's very formal. Japanese ray-in, bowing, clapping, all this stuff. And I just couldn't stop giggling. I thought it was so stupid, just so stupid.
Yeah.
And, when I think back of, oh my gosh, I was so disrespectful for the first like 3 to 6 months because I really didn't know what I was doing.
Mhm.
And, everybody was very tolerant and very gracious until I finally got my rhythm and learned what I needed to do.
Mm. It is very intimidating for someone to walk into a situation like that. See, my location is slightly different. My school does not look like a martial arts school. You walk in,
Mm,
I have a lavish lobby,
hmm
so you don't see a martial arts. You see a nice lobby. I have couches, I have coffee service, free coffee for everybody when you come in, or tea. There's a nice reception area. And so you don't really, the place is open, so you just see a big open room. If you look to your left, there's a kickboxing room. It's got a door, you can see through glass, you can walk in there. And we have lounge, it's a lounge area. Most martial arts schools are the size of my lobby.
Wow.
So, so when people actually come in, they're like, "This is a martial arts school?" I'm like, "Yeah."
hmm
So we're very inviting. We actually
Mm,
walk people in. We don't just let them go in on their own, right?
hmm
At least they had a changing room for women. Most martial arts schools don't have a changing room for women because it's
Wow.
only men, right?
hmm
Now it's come full circle where now they have changing rooms.
hmm
One of the things during COVID, we had to close out changing rooms.
Mm,
So one of the things that we do now is we said, I like the fact that people are walking in with their uniforms.
mm,
So because of that, I made an executive decision not to open my changing rooms
mm,
so that people come mentally prepared before
hmm
they walk through the front door. So mentally, they're prepared at home.
hmm
The kids, everybody knows I'm going to class.
hmm
They put on their gi.
hmm
The only thing is we don't do barefoot. So they come, they bring a bag, they change their shoes in our lobby,
hmm
indoor shoes.
hmm
So everybody already has the mentality of I'm going to class.
hmm
And
So
even if
that
they're
is
else, they'll change.
that is such an interesting point because when I first started seeing Mark for acupuncture, his dojo, it was kind of like a duplex. It was right next to his clinic. And there was the lobby in both in the glass so I could see. And I would, as I'm waiting for him, for my appointments, I could see his students leaving. And they looked like average everyday Joes. I mean, they were just, in their street clothes and stuff. And a lot of times they would just bow in my direction or smile when, we made eye contact. I thought, oh, they seem like a nice bunch of guys. Well, those same men in a black heavy gi was incredibly intimidating.
Mm.
I mean, it was just like almost take my breath away. And the one guy, bless his heart, the one who offered to teach me how to stretch, work on my flexibility, he was the first person I ever had to work with.
Mm.
That Mark had demonstrated a technique and I wasn't watching the technique. I mean, I had my eyes closed because all I heard was screaming and yelling and stuff. And so I was like, oh God, I don't want to pay any attention to this. And when they were done and I opened my eyes, this black belt's coming right in my direction again. And I thought, oh God, what am I supposed to do? So he bowed at me and he said something in Japanese. He said, "Onegaishimasu." And I just looked at him, looked around, going, well, what am I supposed to do? And he looked like he wanted me to do something. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, or what came naturally to me. So I picked up the edges of my gi like it was a skirt, and I curtsied and I said, "Enchante." And it was like, he stopped.
That's so funny.
He looked at me like I had landed from Mars, but it's like, two can play this game. And he looked like he wanted to say something, but he just shook his head and he says, "Okay, you're going to kick me." And I said, "No, I'm not." And he said, "Well, yes, you are. That's the technique. You're going to kick me." And I said, I'm twirling my ponytail. And I said, "But I've never kicked anybody in my life and I don't want to start now." And I said, "Besides, I don't want to hurt you." And he got this cute little grin on his face and you could just see the word bubble above his head. And he said, "Oh, you can't hurt me. Don't you worry." And you can see he was thinking, she's so cute. And then he says, "Just go ahead and kick me." And he's pointing kind of below his belt. And I'm looking where he's pointing. And I says, "Well, I don't want to hit you, in the sensitive area." And he says, "Well," his smile got bigger, "I don't want that either." He says, "Go on, you cannot hurt me. Just go ahead and kick me." And I thought, I don't know what to do. I have never kicked anybody in my life. And he says, "Just, make sure that you hit above the belt. We'll be fine. You can't hurt me." And I said, "Okay." So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I lifted up my right leg and I thrust my pointed toes deep into his abdomen as if I was doing a grand jeté about over the ballet stage. Apparently, I could hurt him because he went oof and fell back, landed on his rear end, and he's holding his belly. And he said, "That was pretty good. Actually, that was really good. Where did you learn to kick like that?" And Mark had seen the whole thing and he just walked over and he looked at me and he said, "How many years of ballet?" And at that point it was 27. So I said, 27. And he nodded his head and he looked at Wes at the black belt and he says, "Don't let the package fool you. She's a lot stronger than she looks." Mental head smacking moment. Two major life lessons there for me. I had some life skills that I never knew I had. Just from taking ballet class, I had some self-defense that I could rely on. And it was like, we all have skills that we can use in real life situations. Sometimes we don't even know we had them. And the other thing was, oh, I am stronger than I look and I'm stronger than I think. So that's kind of how my journey began.
Wow, that's pretty cool. That's really cool. When you think about that, Mark saw the gifts that you had, but you didn't, right? That's really powerful if you think about it.
It is powerful. And a lot of people have said that to me before, that, Mark saw something in me and he knew my potential. And the first time somebody said that to me, I laughed so hard I cried because it was so funny. He didn't see any potential in me. He just wanted to help me. And he saw me as somebody that he was very fond of, somebody who was suffering, and someone who he felt could really benefit from the classes. None of us, nobody ever had any intention or would have ever thought in a million years or 1,000 lifetimes that I would become a black belt. I went in there thinking a few classes, maybe a month, I'm out of here, I'm going to move on with my life. But like I said, it just drew me in. And it wasn't until I got to be about the level of, I think, red belt, that Mark was like, "Look at where you are in ranking." And I said, I'm not going for a black belt. I just kept going to class. Then it happened.
It didn't just happen. I mean,
Well, no.
going to class is part of it, right? But you're right. A lot of people think that showing up is all you need, but you have to do the work. And obviously, you did the work in order to accomplish even red belt. So, and that's one of the things I always tell people. Listen, if you show up, that doesn't mean I'm going to advance you. don't do the work, you'll be in the same place you were last month and the month before
Mhm.
and the month before. It's not up to me to elevate you. It's up to you
Mhm.
to elevate you, right?
That's interesting because it was probably the level of green belt. I think I just gone into the green, and I realized something, and I said it to one of my black belt instructor friends. By that time, I had a whole new group of friends, and they weren't wearing tutus and toe shoes. So it was
Right.
really fun. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I think that Mark is testing me harder than he's testing the guys. And he says, yeah, maybe so, because, you work hard and blah, blah, blah. I thought, that really isn't fair. So I tested my theory in ballet class the next time I went, and I said to my friends in the dressing room, I said, I think he's testing me harder than he is the guys. And of course, the female voices rose in a chorus of, that's because you're a girl. And I'm like, I thought so. So the next time I went to the dojo and I said to him, I says, you know what? I think you're testing me harder than you do the guys. You're harder on me than you are on them. And he says, well, yeah. And that was not the reaction I expected. I expected him to deny it. And he says, you better believe I'm testing you harder. He says, you have to be a lot better than them, because if something happens out there in the real world, you don't have power to rely on. They do. You have to know what you're doing. And I thought, how do you argue with that kind of logic?
You can't,
So I
because
said,
it's
okay.
the truth, right? It's the truth. Technique wins always. I always
Hmm.
tell that to my members. Um, I'm starting, actually, I have every Wednesday, I do a women's self-defense.
Mm,
And I talk to the women and I say to the women, I said, if you're here just to waste my time and yours, that's on you. I said,
hmm,
but if you're here because you want to be able to defend yourself, I said, I'm
hmm,
not going to teach you complicated things. That's a waste of your time. I need you
hmm,
to learn something really quick and be effective and get out. This is
hmm,
not for you to sit there and fight. You want to do that? Come to my regular classes. This
hmm,
is, you're just showing up in your regular street clothes. You're here for 45 minutes. You're
hmm.
not practicing at home because you don't even remember what I taught you last Wednesday. I said, but you have to consider that I'm not going to complicate things for you. They're like, well, what
Mhm,
happens with this? What happens with that? I said, what happens with what I taught you?
mhm.
I know it. I said, all right, prove it. And then they can't get out of it. I'm like, do you
Ugh,
understand that maybe you have to take the time to do
mhm,
it and practice and go home? So it's a quick 6-week course, right? And on the 5th week, I allow them to bring a person. They can
mm.
bring their girlfriends, they can bring their husbands, they can bring their boyfriends, but I always tell them, don't bring your boyfriend and your husband at the same time. It's not good, right? So, and then, so what happens is I say, also, the first thing you need to do is when you go home after your first class and you learn simple techniques and you go and you tell them, grab me like this or grab me like that, they're going to hold you hard.
Mhm,
And they're not going to understand that you just learned it and you can't get out. And most of the times, you're not going to be able to pull it off.
mhm,
I said, but the reason I want them to come on the 5th one is because they can come and hold me as hard as they like. And I will
mhm,
show you, and I'll have you do it to them. And they're not going to want to work with you because when you do it the right way, if you continue doing it, you will not. And I've had a lot of men come to me and go, I don't want to work with my wife anymore, or I don't want to work with my wife anymore. She beats me up. I'm like, yeah, that's a good thing, right? They go, well, yeah, kind of. I said, well, maybe now they have to start taking regular classes. And then
That's so funny.
the other thing that we're starting, and I think you would appreciate this also, is that we're starting a mom's club.
Oh,
Women only,
nice.
women only, because a lot of women don't want to work with the guys.
Mhm,
They get comfortable enough, right? And they
mhm,
may never want to. So
mhm,
that's the other thing that we have to also consider. It's scary. It's not only scary but intimidating. And then you're right. You walk in and you don't know what to do.
mhm.
a lot of the times that even for a kid, when they walk into a facility and they see all these things going on, they hide behind their parents. Why?
Mhm.
Because it's intimidating. It's
Mhm.
threatening, right? And it's that fear of, I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
That's what stops a lot of people from training.
Mhm.
So kudos to you for becoming a black belt and
Thank you.
for Mark pushing you. And maybe he just said, I can help you, but he more than helped you. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. And I do have to just say something about, because as far as training with men, I really prefer working with the guys. Once I got used to them and they got used to me, because they never really had a woman like me, quite like me, in the dojo before. I mean, nobody ever said, "Excuse me, I have to go fix my makeup. I'll be back in a few minutes." Stuff like that. But once we got used to each other, I would not be here if it were not for those men. I mean, yes, Mark got me into the dojo. I worked with him a lot, both, in class and even privately, but it was the entire group as a whole. There were just a few of them that didn't like, especially once I started getting higher in the ranks. They weren't quite as accommodating, let's put it to you that way. They were a little unhappy to see, middle-aged lady, a higher rank than them, but they were just so supportive and so helpful, and they loved training me and teaching me new skills. It was just like almost like I was their pet or their mascot, is what one of my sisters said.
I don't know if I would say it that way, but it's always a challenge for me, and I love a challenge when I meet somebody who needs that extra
Mhm,
assistance, if you will,
mhm,
because then it challenges me in how can I get them to understand this technique or this movement,
mhm,
and how can we teach it to them so they retain it, not only
mhm,
understand it, because I think understanding it is good. And then the other thing I told you about, and you're when you were swimming, that the higher ranked kids, if you will, were teaching the lower ones.
mhm,
I think that's the best way for people to retain what they
mhm,
know when they
mhm,
need to share it with others. So one of
mhm.
the mottos that I go by is we teach to learn and we learn to teach, so that they work together, right?
Absolutely. I even said that to one of my Feldenkrais instructors when I was going through my Feldenkrais training, because I taught a workshop and I was still a student and I was so nervous about it. But it went so well. And as I was driving home, I went, wait a minute, am I learning to teach or am I teaching to learn? And they're one and the same.
Mhm.
And even, we have a bunch of new students in our dojo right about now, and a few of them are women, which is really fun because I take them under my wing. I'm kind of like a protective mother hen. I just want to make sure that they have a wonderful experience. But it's really funny because when we say, we bow to each other and we say onegashimasu, which, means please teach me. And I explain to them, I'm teaching you and you're teaching me. It doesn't matter that I'm a black belt and you're a white belt. We're teaching and learning from each other. So, and that's one of the other beautiful things about the art. And, you know, I'm sure martial arts in general is that community and that supportive environment.
Mm. Without a doubt, when you consider what you just said is that you love helping someone like a mother hen. I think it's a little, well, a lot deeper than that, because when you say you take somebody under your wing, it's really you're seeing what you went through,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to kind of cultivate a path for them so
Mm-hmm.
that they don't quit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you want to see them become black belts. Because for me, it's imagine the person living in the penthouse all by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
nobody, all alone. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure when you were the first female black belt, you were like, it'd be cool if there were other ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where the nurturing part comes in,
Mm-hmm.
to have others, like-minded people in the
Mm-hmm.
same, right?
And I will be going there in a couple of hours and doing it
Nice.
all over again.
That's it. That's it. Rinse and repeat, right?
Right? And never give up, never quit.
Yeah. One of the things that, and I appreciate the fact of modern schools, and I'm not a McDojo,
Mhm,
and
mhm,
there's nothing wrong with a McDojo because guess what? It serves some people.
mhm.
I'm a very traditional martial artist, but when you walk into my school, like I said, it doesn't look like a school. It doesn't smell. I have candles. I have
Mhm,
things. My bathrooms are always clean. I have
mhm.
one of the parents comes over and he goes, his daughter's 9. He goes, my daughter says that she can actually eat in your bathroom. I'm like, well, I hope she doesn't. He goes, no, it's so clean that she feels so comfortable coming
Mhm,
here, and she loves going to the bathroom here. I'm like,
mhm.
oh, well, okay, thank you, but I hope she doesn't need the bathroom.
Actually, that is the ultimate compliment.
Yeah, yeah. During COVID, before we were able to open in New York, we had to pass inspection.
Mm.
So I had a guy independently come from a lab, and he tested all the surfaces, every room, like the bags, all the pad, the flooring, everything. And when he first tested one of the bags, he goes, "Whoa!" He goes, "Okay." I said, "What?" He goes, "This is as clean as an operating room." I said, "Okay." So then he goes, "Okay, now we'll come for the real test." I said, "What's the real test?" He goes, "Show me your bathrooms." I said, "Okay." I go into the bathrooms. He tests everything. And he goes, "I got to tell you," I said, "this is as clean as if somebody was going to do brain surgery in your
Mhm.
bathroom. This is the first bathroom, and I've gone to so many, not only martial arts schools, he had to do a bunch of different places that were opening up." He goes, "This is by far what are you using to clean this
Wow.
place?" And I said, "Well, if I tell you, I got to kill you." Yeah, I'm not just kidding. But,
And you can. You have
but
the skills.
I do have the skills. But the fact that he was so impressed,
Mhm,
and it's just the way we normally clean. It wasn't because of COVID. That's how we've
mhm.
cleaned all the time. So I usually get a ton of companies reaching out, "Can we clean your facility?" And I'm like, "No, you can't." Not the way we clean, right? Because for me, I want somebody to come in and make them feel like this is home. So the
Mhm,
place does not smell. The place is clean, constantly
mhm,
clean. And
mhm,
it's that pride, right? That
mhm,
people can actually come in and go, "This is like my second home."
mhm.
Makes a
I
huge
just
difference.
have to ask you, did you ask that gentleman for a testimonial that you could put on your website?
Oh, he did already. I mean, back then he took pictures and we put it up, and then he did a comparison. He went to, I think the passing range was like 200 or something, and
Uh-huh.
we were like 20 something. The number was 20.
Wow.
He had been to a 7-Eleven prior, and that was like 1,700.
Wow.
Yeah, so this is during that time, right? The dirt,
Woo.
or the infection rate or whatnot.
Mm.
So, and then he also tested between the mats, where the mats sit, and he put
Oh,
the
wow.
in between that, and he goes, "Holy cow, it's clean in there too." I'm like, "Yeah, we clean everything." So, yeah, he put it on his website.
Mhm,
This is
mhm,
what clean is. Right? So
mhm,
we used that a little bit, but we didn't harp on it because that's who we are. And a
mhm,
lot of the people, our testimonials are online, and people watch videos. But it's not just about how clean we are, but how we care. We're very
mhm.
family oriented. You know.
Well, that's part of it. When you see a facility that's that clean and that well taken care of, you know that you've got high standards.
Mm, yeah. I think all places should.
Well.
I don't go into a restaurant if I see the floors dirty,
Mhm.
because then I know the kitchen has to be filthy. And I actually walked out of a place because I walked in and I was about to order. And then I'm looking, it's like dirt, dirt, dirt. I mean, it was bad. And I was like, oh, I just left the tip and I walked out.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, not, if it's dirty out here, I can
Imagine.
imagine what the kitchen is like. And
Mm,
listen, you never know. When you go to a restaurant, you never know what it really looks like.
mhm,
But I've gone to restaurants where I see the owner who there's one particular place out here. The guy owns 4 restaurants. And anytime I see him at the restaurant, he's got tons of staff. He's cleaning. The place is spotless. And that's a place that's always mobbed too. So,
mhm,
like, instead of saying, hey, pick that up, he goes and picks it up. Instead of saying,
mhm,
hey, clean this over here, he goes and clean. So by the time he's cleaning, his staff is like, oh, I was going to do that. He goes, don't worry, I got it. So
mhm,
that's the kind of care that
mhm,
we all should have, especially when we're serving others, right?
mhm. Absolutely.
Especially the
Absolutely.
restaurant business.
Well, and if nothing else, it's a sign of respect for yourself, for your clientele, for your business, for your art, whatever it is. It's respect.
So Cheryl, tell me, how are you guiding other people now?
Oh my goodness. I would have to say probably my most influential way is at the dojo with the lower belts. And of course, like I said, they're pretty new, and just guiding them in a way that is gentle but firm,
Mm,
fun but serious. I lighten it up, especially with the girls, because it's like, okay, the guys aren't going to understand this. This is our little secret, things
mm,
like that. And just to realize that they can find that inner strength and that warrior spirit that is in each and every one of us. And I really do believe that. And just helping to, help them find that spirit and how to use it. So that I would say is my big way of how I'm doing it. Also through my books and my podcast and, getting on other shows. Just my message really is it's a story of empowerment, my personal stories, as well as we can heal from anything physically, emotionally. Our bodies and our minds are incredibly malleable and plastique that we can heal from anything and everything as long as we give ourselves the space, the grace, and the tools to be able to do so.
yeah, yeah. Big shout out to Mark Cox. He's a master instructor, and the guy is just amazing. So, and he's got so many black belts underneath him. So, thank you for joining us, Mark. When we consider helping another human being, helping them excel at something, I mean, the joy we get, right, as instructors is huge. So, one of the things that somebody who does not understand what you and I do, you have a bunch of different swords behind you. And people are going to say, why do you need so many?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Why not? Why do you need so many?
Okay. Well, I only have like the two directly behind my head, and there's a few of the smaller ones off to the side. The two that I have above me, my first sword, it's a really crazy story, and makes me sound a little woo woo and out there.
Mm,
But it was after my father passed away,
mm.
and he found the sword for me.
Oh, wow.
I know it sounds weird. We went to a small town called Idaho Springs in the mountains on the way to, like the ski areas and stuff. And when my dad, would come out every year, ski with us, and we always would stop in Idaho Springs, stop at a specific little bar and have lunch on the way up and on the way back from our ski trips. And so we were, it's kind of in a little bit of a sad mood, but it was okay. And, my husband and I had lunch, and then we started walking down the street, and I said, I need to go in here. And he said, Cheryl, it's a knife shop. I said, I know. I need to go in here. I actually have two knives that are beautiful. They're not displayed,
Mm.
that my father made.
Oh,
And I mean,
wow.
they fit, he was like I said, a metal worker. And so I have two of them. And I thought, I want to go in here to see if maybe they can, sharpen them. Maybe I can find a case for them or something. So when I walked in and I looked, and it was like, you have katanas. And they said, yes, we do. And of course, when I walk in with my husband, people look and they say, can I help you, sir? Because, me walking into a place like that. And he says, talk to her. So I said, I want to see some of these katanas. So he pulled out like 2 or 3. He pulled out this one. I said, I want that one. He pulled it out. And when I unsheathed it, I mean, it just felt so good in my hand. And then I looked on the handle and it had a dragon. And dragons mean a lot to me for a couple of reasons. But, I was raised, like I said, my dad was Eastern European. He was from Czechoslovakia. And we were raised Eastern European Byzantine Catholic. And the church that we grew up in was St. George, the dragon, he wasn't the dragon slayer, who's the victory bearer, but he did slay dragons. And I was like, well, this is kind of strange. Look at that, the dragon. And then I realized my dad's name was George. And I thought, he's the one that told me to go in here. And so I bought the sword. And then I bought the other one a couple of years later. It was another place, I think in Estes Park. And I just fell in love with it because it was so beautiful. Now, the one on top, the top one, I have not ever trained with. And I did train with the one that my father picked out for me. The
Nice.
the other 3 were just kind of like decorative. I found that at another in Estes Park, and it was right before my book came out. And the reason why I got those was because, it's pretty. They're blue and they matched like the font on my book cover. So that's never unsheathed those.
Gotcha. My Chinese name is Chan Dai Long, and it means big ruthless dragon.
Ooh,
I did
love
not
that.
give myself that name, but that was the name that was given to me when I was
Nice.
adopted into the family, the Chinese family that I teach martial arts under. So it's always interesting when we hear stories and how things happen, right?
Well, and if you look underneath on that side of the screen, you can see there's a black belt where I'm pointing.
Right.
That was my father's black belt. He was a black belt in karate or karate. After, by the time daughter number 4 came along, he thought, he needed to get out of the house more and, just, have some ability to protect us. But trust me, he didn't need any more than what he had. But yeah, so that's his belt. And he lived long enough. He actually saw me train when I was a yellow belt, and he lived long enough to know that I got my 2nd degree brown belt. So.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. Cheryl, it's been a great pleasure getting to know you a little bit more. And you're an onion that I keep peeling. So we will hope to continue this conversation for sure. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really, really appreciate you.
Oh, thank
And
you.
come on my other shows. We look forward to having you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for another spectacular conversation. You're a wonderful host.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And I look forward to another conversation. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And Mark, thanks for jumping on. And everybody have an exceptional rest of your day. Take care, everybody.